All right, so my name is Marc Guindon. I am the manager of educational institutional relations. So I deal with all of the schools in the country when it comes to student loans. So basically what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about repayment. So one second, I just want to make sure the timing is off here. Okay, perfect. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to go through basically who you're paying back. We're going to talk about what is your non-repayment period. So that's the payment, that's the period of time where you're not in school, but you're not actually repaying back on your loan. We're going to talk about what it looks like when you enter repayment. We'll talk about how you save money on your student loans. And that's just changing some things up on how you make those payments. We'll talk about a really quick tour of the NSLSC.ca online accounts. We'll go through avoiding any possible problems while you're in repayment. We'll talk about part-time loans very quickly. And then the last thing is we'll just do some helpful information. So basically, who are you paying back? Well, the way that it works is that your Canada student loan and your provincial loan from, so depending on where you have loans, I assume most of you all have Ontario loans, but it all depends. So if you have loans from BC, Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick, or Newfoundland and Labrador, all of your payments are going to the National Student Loan Service Center for both of your loans. So the way that the loans work basically is that when you split them up, not exactly the amount, but close to 60% of the money you received is from Canada and 40% is from the province. So if you have loans from BC, Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick, or Newfoundland and Labrador, you're making one payment to the National Student Loan Service Center for both of those loans. So when we receive that one payment, we actually are splitting it up. 60% will go to the federal portion and then 40% will go to the provincial. So if you have loans from other provinces, so if your loans are from Alberta, um, Manitoba, PEI, or Nova Scotia, basically what happens here is that you're actually making two separate payments on your loans. So you'll be making one payment to your provincial service provider, and then you'll be making one payment to the National Student Loan Service Center. They're not combined, they're just separate. Sorry, let's move on. Okay, so what is your non-repayment period? So your non-repayment period that's the 6-month period after you leave full-time studies. So depending on the province where you have loans, if you have loans from Ontario or Saskatchewan, as well as, no, actually just Ontario, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick, basically what's happening is there is a 6-month period of interest that gets added on once you enter repayment. So your Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick loan will accumulate interest over the 6 months. I'm going to show you how that looks like. Basically, once you get to that point, now you can make payments on a student loan at any time. So if you're in school full time right now, or if you're in your 6 months, or if you're in repayment, you can make a payment on your student loan. There are no penalties on that. So you can make a payment whenever you want to. There is no interest charge on your loan if you return back to school full time. So let's say you're in school right now until December 31st, full time, and then in January, you decide you're not going to go back to school in January, but you decide you're going back to school for the summer. So as long as you're updating your end of study date before you hit the 6-month period, then that actually takes off whatever loan you've had, whatever interest you've had on that loan, and you just keep rolling it around. So if you've been in school, let's say for the last 3 or 4 years, every time that you're out of school, so let's say you're out of school for the summer, whenever you return back to school in September, that interest that got accumulated on your loan always gets taken off because you're always updating your end of study date before you hit the 7th-month period. Send in your confirmation of enrollment if you return to full-time studies before your non-repayment period ends, if you're not reapplying for a loan or a grant. So that's very important. So what you're going to see on here are the end of study dates. So what I want you to focus on is it really doesn't matter what the last day of school is. So whether you finish on the 4th or you finish on the 10th or the 19th or the 22nd of the month, the end of study date always goes to the last day of that particular month. So let's say you're in school until April full time, and on this example, it says you finish school April 4th. Well, your actual end of study date with the National Student Loan Service Center will be April 30th. So that would mean that from May 1st until October 31st, that will be your 6 months of non-repayment period. So that means during that time, if you have an Ontario loan, there will be interest that is accumulating on your loan from May 1st until October 31st. Once you hit November 1st, that is when you will enter repayment, and your first payment is always due on the last day of the month. So if you want to change that date, you can reach out to us to change the date. You can go online to do that as well, but automatically it's set up to come out on the last day of the month. So let's talk about entering repayment. So all of your government student loans you have received are put together in one amount for you to pay back. Well, you receive a digital repayment notification with your within your National Student Loan Service Center.ca online account after you have ended your full-time studies and before the beginning of the repayment period. If you receive loans from BC, Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick, or Newfoundland and Labrador, you will only receive one repayment schedule for both of the loans because you're making one payment. If you have loans from Alberta, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, or PEI, you will be making two payments because there are two different service providers. So after you leave school and before your repayment begins, we will confirm the following. We're going to confirm how much you owe, what the interest rate is, the amount of each monthly payment, the date the payment begins, and the bank account where the payment will be coming out of. So options when you enter repayment. So you have an option to pay off the 6 months interest that has accumulated during the non-repayment period, or you can add it onto your loan balance. Now, automatically what we're going to do is we're going to add it onto your loan balance. But if you do want to pay it off as a separate payment, you need to let us know that you're doing that. So you can't just send in a payment saying, I'm paying off the 6 months interest. What you'd have to do is you'd have to let us know. You'd have to call in and say, I want to make a payment and this is the 6 months interest, because you would see that online on your account, and I want to pay that off separately so that we can actually remove that amount from the actual, so we're not adding it onto your loan. So if you decide to add the 6 months of accumulated interest onto the loan, the advantage of doing that is you will not have to immediately pay off the interest if you do not have the money available. So once you enter November 1st, it just means that you don't have to pay off that 6 months interest that accumulated on the Ontario portion of the loan. You have it added on and it gets paid off over X amount of time. Now, the disadvantage, however, is that you've increased the amount. So if you add that 6 months of interest that accumulated on your Ontario loan onto the loan, well, basically you increase the amount. So when you add interest over time, it's going to cost you a little bit more money to pay off your loan. If you decide to pay it off as a separate payment, well, basically the non-repayment period interest won't be added onto your loan. So your payments will be lower because you've paid it off separately. Also, but the disadvantage is that you have to make a lump sum payment. So whatever that 6 months interest was on your loan, you'd have to make that one lump sum payment at the beginning of November. And then remember, at the end of the month, you also have to make your minimum payment. Paying off the interest will save you money over the lifetime of your loan, however, because you're reducing the amount that you've paid as a total minus interest over X amount of years. So the other choice you have is between a floating or a fixed interest rate. Now, the automatic choice that we're going to select for you is going to be a floating interest rate. So what you're going to see now are basically the differences of floating and the fixed interest rates and what they look like. So if you look at the table right now, it's showing you all of the interest rates. So remember, you have two portions of a loan. 60% of the money you've received is generally from Canada, and 40% is from your province. So if you have Canada loans, you'd be looking at the prime rate plus 0%, and currently the prime rate is 2.45%. So Ontario, for the 40% of that money, you'd be paying the prime rate, and today it's 2.45 plus 1%. So you'd be paying 3.45% on basically 40% of the money that you owe. Now, if you want to go to a fixed rate, you can, but the numbers change around. So basically your prime rate would be for Canada would be prime plus 2%. And Ontario, that is not a choice. You only have the floating interest rate. Now, over 99% of all students are on a floating interest rate. That is the best place to be anyways, because when you average it over time, you're going to save money. And basically what we do anyways is we're always estimating your payment. So whenever you receive your payment amount, it's going to say your estimated monthly payment is X. So what's important in that is you'll always be making that payment. Even if the prime rate's going up and down over time, all you're going to see is we're going to make a slight change towards the end of your repayment. So what happens is if you're in repayment, usually it's 114 months, which is 9.5 years. So basically towards the end of that repayment, around the 7-year mark, what we're going to do is that's when we're going to start to make an evaluation of what happened to the prime rate over the last 7 years. So if the prime rate has increased, then towards the last 1.5 or 2 years of repayment, that's when we're going to start to make up that difference in what happened to the prime rate over time. Whereas if you go on a fixed rate, you're always paying that amount, but you'll be paying more interest from the very start. So most students stay on a floating rate. They don't go to a fixed rate. You can, however, go to a fixed rate at any time. You just need to let us know. Now, once you decide to go to a fixed rate, you cannot go back to a floating interest rate, however. So floating rate is typically better when you average out the interest rate over time. So let's talk about how long you'll take to repay your loan. Now, automatically, you can choose any length of time to repay your student loan, up to a maximum of 14.5 years, which is 174 months. And most borrowers take 9.5 years or 114 months of payments. Now, if you take a shorter term, it means you will pay less interest because interest is not accumulating over time, but your monthly payments will be larger. If you decide to go longer term, all it means is your monthly payments will be lower, but you'll pay more interest because you're taking longer to pay it back. Now, there are no penalties on a student loan. So all I want you to remember about the amount of time that you're in repayment is you can move this around because there are no penalties. So you can start off on a 9.5 year repayment. And let's say after a year, you decide that you want to change that. You now want to go to a 6-year repayment. You can revise the terms on your loan, go to a 6 years and start paying off on a 6-year term. If you're finding that hard after 6 months, or you've lost a job, or something's happened and you need to go back to longer, you can go back to a longer term. All it means is you're just changing your payments, which means you're also changing the interest because you're taking either longer or shorter to pay it off, but you can move these around because there are no penalties. So you can adjust your terms at any time during your repayment period. Now, how do you wish to submit these payments? Basically, how this works is the first payment is due on the last day of the month you enter repayment. So basically, if you finish school in April, you will enter repayment on November 1st, which is the 7th month after you finished, and your payment is due at the end of that month. Now, when you enter repayment, you have the options to set up, confirm, change any pre-authorized payments by logging into the NSLSC.ca account. Automatically, we will be taking out that estimated payment from the last bank account we put money into. So wherever we put in that money is automatically where we're taking the money out. So if you have another account where you'd like us to take the payment out of, you will need to let us know. Now, if you don't wish to have pre-authorized payment taken from your account, you can always make your payments through online banking, through telephone banking, or you can send in check or money orders. Just make sure that you are sending your account number. So when you're logging into the NSLSC.ca, if you are doing check or money orders, make sure you're putting your account number on those checks. Do not put your social insurance number on a check and mail it. And that's just in case it gets delivered to the wrong place. Somebody now has your name, address, and your social insurance number. So if you are sending in checks, always put your account number on it. The best way to do this is pre-authorized or online banking, or logging in through your NSLSC.ca account and sending in the payments that way. Now, how can you save money on these student loans? Well, the best time to make a payment on a student loan is while you're in school. So if you're in school currently right now full-time, and let's say you're finishing off in April of 2021, any payments you make between now and April 30th of 2021 are interest-free because there's no interest that has accumulated on your loan yet. So all of that payment will go towards principal, which will save you in the long term because you're reducing the overall debt that you have. The second thing you can do is make payments during your non-repayment period. So during those 6 months where you don't have to make payments, if you are making payments, what you're doing is most of that money is going towards principal. You'll be paying off a portion of that Ontario interest that is accumulating, which means you're reducing the overall amount as well. So you will be saving money over time. If you can pay a larger amount than the minimum that's being calculated for you, any extras that you're putting on is basically going towards principal, which is reducing your overall debt, which is going to reduce your overall interest as well. If you can make payments instead of once a month, you make them every week or every 2 weeks. Well, by making more payments means you're paying off more principal, which means you're paying less interest, which will save you money in the long term. The other thing is you can make lump sums. So let's say every, 3 months you decide you want to make an extra $200 payment. Well, those extra payments that you're putting on there is going towards principal, which is reducing time and reducing interest. You can do a combination of these if you want to, because doing combinations will save you money over time anyways. So I'm going to give you a really quick example here. Now this is based on a $25,000 student loan. So this would be a Canada-Ontario loan put together. The whole amount comes up to $25,000 to pay back. It's on a floating rate, and let's say the prime rate was 3%. What you'd be looking at if you did nothing on your loan is your payment amount would be $289.80 a month. It would be for 114 months, and you would pay approximately $8,000 of interest on that loan. So you would save nothing because you're just paying that amount. If you decide when you look at your budget and you say, you know what, I can actually pay $20 more each month. So the required payment is $289.80, but you decide you're going to pay $309.80. By paying $20 more a month, you're reducing the amount of month in repayment from 114 to 106, which means you're reducing the amount of interest to $7,200 approximately, and you'd save about $850 by doing that. Let's say instead of doing that, you're just going to make your payments of $289.80, and once a year you make an extra payment of $250. Well, by doing that, it will reduce it to about 105 months. That'll be the interest, so around $7,100, and you'll save about $950. Let's say instead of doing any of those, you're just going to make your payments every 2 weeks. Well, by making your payments every 2 weeks, you're actually making 2 extra payments a year. So what's happening is that you're reducing it to 102 months, you're bringing it down to about 7,000, and you'll save about $1,000 in interest that you don't have to pay. Now you can do combinations of these. Just make sure that you know what, whenever you look at your budget, whatever works out best for you. So if you decide you're just going to make your monthly payments, or you're going to make, you know what, let's just say you're going to make your payments every 2 weeks, and then once a year you add an extra $250 payment sometime during the year. Well, if you combine both of those together, you're basically going to reduce your repayment by about a year, and you're going to save almost $2,000 in interest you won't have to pay on the loan. So there are little combinations of things that you can do here just to help yourself out, just by making some different payments and payment options. So let's take a really quick tour of the NSLSC.ca online account. There's a lot that you can do in there. Basically, once you log in, you can easily change your contact information in your My Account or My Profile tab. We can't stress enough how important it is that you make sure that the information in this section is always complete and current. You can always check the status of your loans and get important details about your loan by going to the My Account tab and choosing My Funding options. So if you go there, it gives you different options. It'll show you different things. You can change your banking information on here. You can update that as well. If you go into the loan section, it'll show you what your loan number is, the amount owing, what status you're in, if you're in repayment, in study, or in your 6 months. You can go through the enrollment options. So basically, if you're in school, but you haven't applied for a new loan, but you need to update your end of study, all of that stuff will be there where it shows you exactly what you need to do. to move forward. It'll show you all of your disbursement history, so all of the payments you've received, when you've received them, how much the months are, and whether they're full-time or part-time loans if you've received both. And then if you run into problems where you cannot afford to make the payments, there's repayment assistance or there's revision of terms. So let's get into that now. So let's talk about avoiding any possible problems while you're in repayment. So what happens if I don't repay my loan? Well, if you can't make payments, can't make your payments on your loans, contact us right away. We can discuss options. Failing to repay your loan without contacting us means your student loan will eventually go into default. So what does that exactly mean? After 270 days or 9 months of non-payment on your loan, the loan is returned back to the government. So those loans are actually returned back to CRA, to the Canada Revenue Agency, and they will basically use whatever means that they have to collect on that particular loan. So before getting to the 270 days, if there's at any point, at any time where you cannot afford to make payments, please make sure to reach out online, look at the revision of terms, or look at the repayment assistance plan where it can help you different ways. So let's talk about the first one, which is the repayment assistance plan. So the way that this works is that if you qualify for the repayment assistance plan, you will not be required to make a student loan payment above an affordable level. So when you enter the information, it calculates a number. An affordable payment is calculated based on what your gross income, your gross family income is, your family size, and other factors. And as a result, the payment could be either lowered or put on hold for a 6-month period. Remember that you must apply for the repayment assistance plan through the National Student Loan Service Center every 6 months. So when you get approved for repayment assistance, you get approved for a 6-month period. After those 6 months are up, if you need it again, you reapply. Now, if you're applying for this online through the NSLSC.ca, it'll give you reminders. Oh, wait, your repayment assistance plan is going to expire on this date. Do you need help for another 6 months? If so, please reapply here. So it's automatic. You can just go back in, reapply, send all that information in. If you decide that's not for you, but you want to revise your terms, well, revising your terms is just moving the amount of time that you're in repayment. So basically, this is where you're going from 114 months to 174, or anywhere in between. You just need to change the amount of months, which is going to change the amount you're going to be paying per month. It'll also change the interest because it depends on how long you're going to make those payments for. So you can do the revision of terms whenever you want, and the repayment assistance plan you can apply for every, you apply once for 6 months, and then after that you reapply if you need it again. You can apply at the beginning, you can apply 3 years down the road, or 6 years. It's whenever you really need the help that you can apply for it. Let's quickly go through part-time student loans. So if you have any of those, they are separate. So that is a different payment than your full-time student loans. So part-time loans do not require payments while you're in study and for the 6 months following the end of study. So it's the same rules as the full-time loan. There's no payments required during your 6 months of non-repayment. You will enter repayment on the 7th month, but they are separate payments from your full-time loan. So there are debt management tools available for those as well. So if you run into problems where you can't afford the part-time student loan payments, you would apply for RAP, and it would also the repayment assistance plan, or you can revise your terms. It would work on both. Make sure that you're confirming your enrollment, however, for full-time to keep your part-time loans in non-repayment status. So just make sure that we always know what your end of study date is for full-time and part-time, just to make sure that you're not going into repayment on one loan or the other if you're eligible for that. So let's talk about some helpful information. So the ways that we communicate with you is you receive notification emails from the National Student Loan Service Center to check your online account. If you're not comfortable hitting the links in those emails, whenever you get a notification from the National Student Loan Service Center, just open your browser, type in NSLSC, and log in that way to your account, and then you can see when you go to your mailbox basically what's happening. Okay, so there's always going to be action items, so always keep your email up to date, because that's how we're going to be communicating with you mostly. check your NSLSC online account periodically. I would just have a reminder, maybe in my phone or just a reminder, just that, you know what, every 2 months, just log in and check and just make sure everything's okay. Make sure that you stay in touch and that you're checking your status. If anything is happening, if you're in school full time and that stuff, just want to make sure that everything's okay. And if not, then you need to let us know. It's important that you improve. You can also improve your financial literacy. So, if you visit Canada.ca and you go to Money and Finances, there are some really good information on the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada website. So they have some really good tips on how to budget and how to save money on your student loans or applying for a credit card. They have really, really good information there. So the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada is a really good place or website to go visit if you're looking for some tips and tricks on how to save some money. Make sure that you're creating a budget. So stay on track of your budget. There's also one that's available if you go to Canada.ca, Money and Finances, and Managing Your Money. If you borrowed more than what you needed, so let's say you got money but you didn't use it all, just consider paying that back on your student loan earlier. So let's say you got X amount in loans and you don't think you're going to need it all. Pay it back earlier. It'll help you out in the long run because you're reducing your overall debt. And make sure that, you know what, this is all the contact information for the NSLSC as well as provincial loans. So if you have Canada, Ontario loans, you're only dealing with the National Student Loan Service Center when it comes to repayment or while you're in school. If you have loans from Alberta, Nova Scotia, Manitoba, or PEI, you'll be dealing with National for your Canada loan, but you'll also be dealing with your provincial service provider, depending on the province where you got loans. So just make sure that you're keeping everybody in the loop. If you have any questions, that's where you need to reach out to. Basically, if you want to send an email, I'm more than able to send this presentation, or it's available in the link anyways. But that's pretty much the end for me. So I'm sure we're going to have questions now. So let's see what those questions are going to look like.